Welcome back to the ARKAT Urban Planning and Design podcast. I'm Fatma Al-Khayat and joined by my co-host, Dr. Ahmed Al-Mulla. Today's episode is one we've been especially looking forward to and a topic of conversation that sits very closely to our hearts as we dive into the emotional and psychological dimensions of urban life, how cities can either support or suppress our well-being.
And we're honored to be joined today by Dr. Louise Lambert, a pioneer in the field of positive psychology and well-being in the Middle East. She is also the director of happiness and well-being programs at Happiness Matters, the editor-in-chief of the Middle East Journal of Positive Psychology, and a psychologist with over 2 decades of experience working across education, policy, and organizational change.
Her research has helped shape how we think about happiness, not just as a personal goal, but as a public responsibility, and increasingly an urban design imperative. Today, we'll explore what it means to design places not just for functionality or for beauty, but for emotional connection, calm, purpose, and belonging. Mm-hmm. So without further ado, thank you, Dr. Louise, for being here today with us.
Thank you.
We're really grateful to have this conversation with you around.
My pleasure. I'm happy to be here. Thanks so much.
So happiness is a growing term actually in urban planning and architecture as we know today. I mean, we have Charles Montgomery, right, who's a Canadian urbanist who wrote a whole book on happy cities. We've also have a growing discipline called environmental psychology, where it studies the relationship between humans and its physical surrounding. But and your work specifically places happiness, right, at the center of how we experience space. But before we dive into cities, can you take us back to what initially drew you into the field of positive psychology and how your journey led you to explore its relationship with the built environment? Because I think that's a really interesting connection.
Mm-hmm. So thank you. And I love the word public responsibility. I'm going to write that down. That's actually a much better idea than I could have come up with. So I am a psychologist, and for many years I worked in northern Alberta in Canada, and I worked in mental health. So lots of doom and gloom, suicide, drug and alcohol addiction, poverty, divorce, eating disorders, all of this. And I was doing my doctorate degree, and I found this little course called Positive Psychology, and I thought, ooh, easy A. Yeah. I'm so taking this course. And I really didn't think much about it, and I took this course, and I was like, this is the psychology everybody's been looking for.
Yeah.
So rather than just always looking at how do we reduce mental health issues, how do we reduce misery, how do we reduce unhappiness, this is really applying the same science, same psychological science, the same rigor, the same measurement, the same kind of standards, if you will, but towards improving life. So making life actually worthwhile getting up for. And that's really important because in positive psychology, psychology general as well, we know that when people are just less miserable, it's not enough. They just slide back down into misery over time. Yeah. We really need to give them the skills and tools, but also information about what do we mean by happiness, what is well-being, so that they can build a better life, right, and not slide down into that piece. So that's really where my journey started, this little Mickey Mouse course. I did get an A, by the way.
Amazing. I'm sure, I don't doubt it.
But it really just opened up this whole new area of possibility that psychology is more than, we can make people feel good and not just less bad.
Right.
And it's interesting that you mentioned Charles, because I met him in 2018. He actually came to Dubai.
Yeah.
Okay. Somebody put me in touch. And the person who put me in touch, so I edited a book in positive psychology for the Middle East specifically. And one of those chapters was on the built environment. And so the author of that chapter lost her co-author and said, would you like to co-author? Yes. I say yes to everything. Absolutely. Yes. And so I started to help going through the research literature, and I'm like, get out. This is amazing that we can actually think about how the space influences us.
Yes.
Charles was coming to town. She put me in touch with him. So we went out for a long walk in Bur Dubai, in Dara. He wanted to see the real Dubai, how people live, what is the street life like. So right away after he left, of course, I read his book, and then I thought, this is what I'm doing.
No way.
That
That
was
was a
actually one of the
trigger.
most influential books, even in my journey,
Yeah.
Happy Cities.
It's really how
yeah.
it started.
Yeah, yeah,
He
yeah.
kicked it off.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
I'm so
he's
glad that I
amazing.
mentioned him.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. Charles Montgomery, Happy City.
Yeah.
All right. So there's also a perception, Dr. Louise, that happiness is too subjective to be taken seriously in policy or urban planning. But your research and global movements like Bhutan's Gross National Happiness, Dubai's Happiness Agenda, show that happiness can be measurable and meaningful. Why do you believe happiness deserves a seat at the urban planning table? And what makes it such a powerful lens for shaping cities?
Because without it, life is worthless. What's the point?
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So, at the end of the day, we have to ask ourselves, what is the purpose of life? It's not just to get through to the end, clock time, and say, okay, I'm done. Thanks, everybody. But to do something with ourselves and to feel good along the way and to have experiences with people, becoming our best selves, reaching our goals, reaching our greatest heights. And it is measurable, and we do measure it every single day at a national level, at an individual level, at a community level. And really, if we pay so much attention to misery, and we can measure that, we know that it's very costly for cities, it's very costly for governments, it's very costly for individuals as well. Why couldn't we put in that same effort and seriousness to developing happiness? So it's not this wishy-washy, nebulous state, but it is something that we've been able to operationalize and develop strategies for, but also to think about what does that look like in cities. So when people ask me exactly that question, why should it be part of urban planning? My question is, why shouldn't it?
Why shouldn't it be, right?
Economy gets a place,
Right.
health gets a place, everybody gets a place.
Yeah.
We need to make a chair for happiness as well.
Absolutely. And it needs to be at the center, too, if you ask me, or head of that table,
And I just love the fact that it's categorized under, or you categorize it under the word happy. You don't use the word mental well-being, instead use the word happiness.
Yeah. Because it is different. Often we focus on mental health, and that's important because we know that cities are terrible for mental health, depression, anxiety, major mental health issues. But there's more to life also than just poor mental health. There's living well, having quality of life, being satisfied with our lives, having good relationships, and again, reaching our best selves.
Right.
It does matter.
But there's also a paradox, 'cause I think from your research, you also mentioned that cities do have impacts on our mental health, but they also have the opportunity to give you access to, for example, the best help you need, the best services. So how do you see that?
Yeah, so again, it comes down to how well do we build cities. So generally speaking, if we look at who's happier, is it rural or urban? Generally, and I say generally because we have examples of really terrible cities that are going to make you miserable, guaranteed, and then we have others that are just going to elevate your life to the 50th degree. But we also have small towns as well.
Right.
Yeah.
When those are rural areas that have lots of amenities and services, then they also have the same gains. But generally across the board, people tend to be happier in cities in a number of different ways and a number of different reasons. So one is simply because there are more amenities, but also there's enough people. There's a critical mass. We have that concentrated infrastructure. Just something as simple as universities. You can't go to university in a small town. It doesn't exist. There's not enough people. There's not enough grocery stores to feed all the people that are there. So cities give us affordances. We can live our good lives in cities because there's gyms, there's hospitals, there's schools, there's universities, there's the opera, the theater, all of these things, arts, etc. So people tend to experience more positive emotions in cities. They also have higher quality of life. On the other hand, they're also more stressed. They tend to be, their social relationships tend to be a little bit weaker as well. Everybody's a stranger at the end of the day. But also this influx of people, density. After a while, you're like, you just want to scream in the ball and tell everybody to go away, right? So too much is also too much. But generally speaking, yes, cities allow us to live a good life, particularly when they're done well.
That's the key, right?
Yeah.
But what are the psychological factors you think that tip the scale? Because you're talking about that. Can we dive a little bit deeper into it?
So if we're thinking about what do we need to be happy, and what do cities need to provide? So definitely all the building blocks, and this is typically how we think of cities. Are there schools? Are there, hospitals? Like kind of all of the things we need, the objective things that we need. But then there's all these psychological pieces that we pay less attention to, and turns out there's kind of a lot. And when we look at that list is the same for whether you're living in Kenya or whether you're living in Finland. It's what are our human needs, and how can cities meet that? So easiest, social. We need to be able to connect with people. We need to be able to be around people, but not so much that we just want to punch them in the face because there's too many, and not so little that we're like, hello, if I died in my apartment, would anybody know?
It's that sweet, because of course there's the question around loneliness, right?
And loneliness is growing worldwide. So it's about a third of the population. So it's not small, but every third person you see is going to be like, and loneliness, just as an aside, I just feel the need to say this all the time. It's not a reflection of you can't make friends, there's something wrong with you. It's more an outcome of our poor social connections.
So important to actually put out there.
Because people personalize that. Exactly. It's like, it's not about you. We've just grown awkward and weird around people because we're always scrolling, for one, but also our cities are making it difficult for us to connect.
Of course, of course.
So social needs, definitely. And then most of these are not going to be a surprise. Our physical needs, we need to move, we need to exercise, we need clean air, whatnot. And then there's others, that maybe we think about a little bit less. So, we need to be intellectually stimulated.
Yes.
So if you've ever gone to these post-communist countries, you're like, oh my gosh, this is so depressing. Like rows of houses, they're all exactly the same, this bland color. Every single street is, I don't know how anybody finds their house, frankly. And there are a few examples of that here.
Yeah.
You can edit that out. Okay.
Oh, we're not.
Okay, no problem. But we need cognitive stimulation. Again, not too much. So if we think about the billboards on Sheikh Zayed Road and the lights and the practically blinding you, I always miss my exit because I'm like, oh, I'm so distracted, But that makes us cognitively tired. It makes us irritable. It makes us less sociable. So we need, again, it's like the Goldilocks, just enough, but not too much or too little. We also need to be inspired.
Yes.
Exactly.
That's so important.
God. I went to the opera the other night, and it wasn't so much the opera, but we walked out during the break, and I'm like, look at this building. It never fails to impress me, right? It's tall, it's the tallest building in the world, it's beautiful, it's elegant, and it lifts your spirit a little bit.
Yeah.
And cities need to lift our spirit a little bit. So it's about being inspired, but it's also about the need to experience positive emotional experiences.
Absolutely. And I think I love that you touched on Dubai and you gave a good example of like Dubai Opera and the feeling you get when you're outside of the plaza. And Fatma and I were actually in a panel discussion 2 days ago where the whole topic of conversation was about public spaces and the importance of public spaces to make people feel a sense of belonging and just again, building social infrastructure and tightening that social fabric. So my question is, how well do most cities in our region meet those needs that you just talked about today?
I think we are getting better.
Yes.
So I love what Dubai, they just released this platform like last week or something about this building communities.
Yes.
So social relationships are on the radar. I think people are understanding that when people, kind of like work, when you have one friend at work, turnover drops.
Yeah.
When you have one neighbor that you like, and we don't talk to our neighbors either. When you have friends, you don't want to leave the city. So the social relationships really matter. So I feel like we're starting to pay a lot more attention to these psychological factors because now the foundations are there.
Yeah.
Everybody's got streets, schools, sewers, electricity, everything's in place. And now it's about how do we help people live a good life in these spaces. So I can't speak for cities everywhere, but I know certainly Dubai and Abu Dhabi, they're on it.
Yeah.
Like they're really on it.
Yeah.
And it's making me happy. So I live in Business Bay and every day I ride my bike and now I'm seeing there's this beautiful row of trees. This is new.
Yeah.
There's a few benches popping up and I'm
Amazing.
like, check this out, right? Like it's nice.
Yeah, definitely.
And I love riding my bike. That just makes me happy. But it's nice to see that the city loves me riding my bike as well. So you feel respected as a resident as well. It's like somebody actually cares that I'm happy out here. Like
And
that
that
goes a long
starts
way.
to build deeper, more meaningful connections between you and the city.
Well, and you end up being proud of it.
Yeah.
So my sister's going to come in a couple of months.
Yeah.
And if she's not, she better be listening to this. But I want to show her the city.
Yeah.
I want to show her where I ride my bike every day. I want to show her the canal. I want to show all these places. And not the 5-star glitz. I mean, yeah, okay, it's interesting, but this is how I live my life. This is how the city cares about me. This is how the city cares about us.
Yeah.
And to feel seen by your city. Wow. That's cool.
It is.
I love how you're talking about everything, because it's everything we discuss, but we just use the urban planning terms, and you're just flipping it around and bringing it from a psychological sense, which I love.
From a human perspective.
From a human perspective, but that's, you know, the heart of what ARKAT is, right? Is putting people first. And I love that you mentioned the whole row of trees and the benches, and that's the whole point. Actually changing your city can start very small, you know.
Yeah.
When they people talk to us and we say we're urban planners, they get very overwhelmed, like, oh my God, you're a city they're thinking very large scale, but we're like, actually the change comes from small interventions.
Yes.
It does.
Like planting trees
Or having benches.
And having benches, right? And automatically that starts to foster all those kinds of social connections. But I really wanted to, because you introduced through your research the idea of and correct me if I'm wrong, Udemonic Design,
perfect.
right?
Yeah.
So, and what that ultimately means is that spaces that help people grow, connect, and become their best selves. And I think it's a really powerful concept.
Yeah, definitely.
If we were to walk through a public space or neighborhood that truly embodied that concept, what might we see, feel, or experience differently?
Yeah. So let's back up a little bit. So I did not invent it. Just so, you know, whoever did is watching me going, hey, she stole my idea. But it's again, in research, we just use last names, but it's Mikus. Mikus.
Okay.
I don't know how to pronounce it. But anyway, so Udemonic Design belongs to, I think her first name is Jenna. And it's really the idea. So when we think about happiness, there's kind of two big philosophies. So one is eudaimonia. It actually stems from Aristotle, ancient Greek, guy walking around in a toga on the island. Okay? And at almost the same time, there was another guy walking around in a toga on an island, and he was Epicurus, and he talks about hedonic happiness. So we have hedonic and eudaimonic. Hedonic is easy. It's right here, right now.
Instant pleasure.
Chocolate bar, buy those shoes, done, easy. So that's easy to get. It's just whatever, instant happiness. Eudaimonic is a little bit more complicated. So it's the kind of happiness that comes from growth. So it doesn't always feel good, but it's the kind of, you know, so going on a run, that'd be an example of eudaimonic activity. Feels good after, during, not so much. Doing a 4-year university degree doesn't feel so good during, but after, you've really grown. You are becoming your best self. So eudaimonia is really, Udemonic Design is really a philosophy. It's a way of thinking about what do people need versus only what cities can offer.
Okay.
So let's take a little example, and this is a real life example. So I have a gym membership, but I know if I do not leave my apartment by 5 p.m., I cannot go because I'm stuck in B2, my parking lot, and I will be stuck there for an hour. So there's a traffic jam in my building. I can't even get out. Okay. So often in cities will be like, okay, people need to be healthy. Gyms, so either private sector or public, community, development center, whatever. And then that's it. We don't think about it anymore because now it's up to you to figure that out. But if I can't figure it out, I can't be at my best self. So when cities want people to be healthy, well, yes, I have a gym membership, but I can't get there. Cities want people to be social. Well, that's great.
But there is a
Where
lacking
am I
in
supposed to
public
do
spaces.
that?
Exactly.
Where am I supposed to do that? I'm not going to hang out at the red light and be like, hi, you want to be my friend? Like, it's a bit awkward, How am I supposed to do that? So it's almost like the last mile problem. It's the tiny little, how do we nudge people to that affordance so that they can live their best selves? Because people know what they need. I know I need a bike ride. I need some form of physical activity. I need to speak to a human. Now, because my parking lot is jammed, I'm like, forget it, I'm not going to go to the gym, but I have a bike trail outside. my apartment now, which I didn't before. So now I bring my bike down in the elevator, I go outside, and I'm immediately on the trail. So I don't need to be sitting in my parking lot, which I would forego the decision anyway.
Yeah.
Now I can go. So now I get my physical needs met, but I also get my psychological needs met, because that's where I do my best thinking. Like, oh, I should do this today, and I should do that, and how am I going to solve this problem? And then, oh, there's a bird. And but it's also where I meet people. So 2 days ago, I saw these 2 lost tourists, and I'm like, because I talked to random people.
Yeah.
Hi, do you need any help? And they were like, okay.
That's definitely
And we
the
had little
Canadian in you, Dr.
conversation. I know,
Louise.
we just talked to everybody. And so we started chatting, but I thought, I can't even sit down with them because there's no bench. And we didn't talk too long because where I was, there was no trees and it was getting hot. So I carried on.
Okay.
So that's an example again of if cities can just do these little tiny affordances, now I get my social needs met. Now I get my social connection. Now I get my social capital needs met. My psychological needs, my emotional needs. I get everything met, not just because there's gym and a track, but I can get there.
Yeah.
So again, that last mile question is thinking about, instead of cities going, well, we have all that. You do, but can people get to them? Can I use them? Can I afford them? Can I make use of what you're giving me? Maybe I'm tired, and this is another issue.
Yeah.
Everybody's got a racetrack around their apartments at night now.
Yeah.
All these racing cars, right? So if you want me to be productive, well, now we need to take care of the noise at night. Okay.
Right.
So it's thinking about, instead of what can we give people, flipping the script, as you say, what do people need to live a good life? And they need that physical well-being, social well-being, job well-being. So we know what they need, but how do we help them get that?
And it has a long-term as well. It's a long-term investment as
It is.
well, because that's going to reflect back on the economy
Yes.
as well.
Yeah.
And it's also what draws people to a city.
Of course. Yeah.
But cities can, and then this is where I think cities need to be very ambitious and to say, okay, we know why people come here, why they're drawn
Yeah.
to us, but more importantly, how do we want them to become as a result of living here?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
So if we want people to be healthier, we know what we need to do. If we want people to be more social, we need urban furniture, because there's no place for them to meet.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of urban furniture, and you touched upon this too when you were describing the upgrades that were happening in front of your apartment. I mean, we know from the discussion we've been having that designing for happiness has to look beyond like big and flashy interventions. It's the small things that you mentioned, like a shaded bench, a playful sculpture, a quiet corner. And these really shape how we feel. So I'm going to ask you for some simple, practical design tactics that we could implement at the street level that you feel like would have a huge impact.
So I think exactly what you've said. So the urban furniture now doesn't just need to be a bench, but it can be a picnic table. It could be furniture that people move around.
Right.
So if you've got a
Yes.
family of
Yes.
10 and you're like, let me just
Can move the chairs
reorganize
around.
this, right?
Yeah.
But big enough so they can't steal it, but movable anyway. It could also be things to play. So we often put
Yes.
children's playgrounds, but we forget that adults want to play as well. Now, we're not going to, ride around on a pony or something, but there are, adult games, if you will. And it could be, I think the most common example is that the big giant chessboard. We've seen this in many cities.
Yes.
Okay. But it can also be installations that only work with many people.
Okay. Could you give an example?
So I went, and it was one of these far-flung places, I don't even remember where, but it was kind of this weird musical installation where you could only make it work if I'm like banging on the drum here,
it's
and then somebody else
interactive,
needs to, press a pedal over here, and somebody else needs to, do something else to make the whole thing move.
Wow.
So now necessarily I come up to it and I'm like, hey, you, come here,
help me out here.
Come help me out. It forces us to interact, but
Yeah.
it's safe to do so because it's not a direct, hi, how are you? But we're focused on a neutral third object. But people clearly see this is the goal.
Yeah.
It's a little bit playful, so people don't mind, but also builds social trust.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing. So it's not just, oh, we made this thing saying, okay, thanks, bye. But it's what stays with you after. People are good I can approach people and ask for help, and they'll probably say yes. I just had an example of it there, and people aren't all mean and weird, because the guy smiled and he said goodbye, and it was nice, and it was safe, and it was okay. And we need that social trust.
Absolutely.
So if we think about, the World Happiness Report, which was just released last month, we have declining rates of social trust in the world today. So the more people don't trust one another, the more cynical they get. They undervalue people's kindness. And when you start being cynical, you don't trust people, you start getting angry as well. And you start getting resentful. And this is a bad situation for societies, but also governments too.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Not good. So the more we can build that social capital through opportunities to connect in ways that are safe, fun, but also add a positive emotional boost to your day. You're like, did you see this? I made this thing sing, and then you go home and you talk about it, right? And these positive emotional experiences spread really easily.
Of course.
And that's really happiness.
Yeah. I want to bring back the conversation, because you were talking about finding the sweet spot between solitude and actually being social, right? What do you think from the perspectives of obviously cities? So how can cities make room for quiet, introspective spaces without losing energy and vibrancy?
Yeah. And we don't think of this because people are drawn to cities precisely for the action, the
and the social aspect,
the vibe, the buzz.
Yes.
And it's the same thing that stresses us and tires us and makes us
exhausting.
I'm going to go stay home and just watch Netflix tonight. Like, it's too much stimulation.
And a lot of people, actually, sorry to cut you off, a lot of people that I talk to nowadays that are living in Dubai feel that they can only accomplish 1 or 2 errands a day, because then they're emotionally drained.
And that's a great example of this overstimulation can come from people, but it can also come from traffic. It can come from billboards and lights and noise and So yes, we need areas where it's quiet, at a minimum, quieter. So this is where parks are great, but we don't need, although big parks are wonderful, but even little pocket parks, little pop-up parks as well. Parks, I was again cycling yesterday, and we're under the overpass, and I'm like, look at all this space.
And
it's
shaded.
There, and it's shaded, and everything grows in this city. I mean, come on. So these would be easy little places. You put a big green border around it, cut some of that noise, but people can just kind of sneak in, sit on a bench. And it would be cooler in terms of temperature as well.
Of course.
But to get some of that solitude. And solitude is good for us psychologically. It's where we get our best ideas.
Definitely.
So, when you're stressed and you're thinking about a million things, you can't solve anything. You actually need that free, nothing to think of, and then the idea comes to you.
Right.
So spaces to walk, again, just quiet. So it can be a physical space. It can also be a bylaw. No honking zones.
Oof. That would be amazing.
And that'd be nice, right? No speeding zones at 3 a.m., please, with loud mufflers. Wouldn't that be nice? I'm like out of my mind, where I'm living now. But, so psychologically, this is good for us. Emotionally, this is good for us. But even health-wise. So you're around noise all the time, your stress hormones kick in. You maybe don't realize it, but you start to get run down more easily. You start to get, catch colds more easily. But think about, you've got a hospital that is next to the freeway. Big trucks all the time. You've just gotten a car accident. You come out of surgery and you're trying to sleep. You can't sleep. You can't sleep. So your health outcomes actually decline just with noise alone.
Wow.
So again, this solitude is not just to help us think and to give us a break from all the stimulation, but even just from a health perspective. Kids at school, just to be able to focus and concentrate. Traffic going by, no, this doesn't work. So learning outcomes tend to drop in noisier neighborhoods as well. So thinking about what is good for our mental health and our well-being can help us put things in different places where we can't rearrange. Then we can start thinking about noise. We can start thinking about cheap interventions. I'm thinking of Satwa. Let's just paint something on the wall. It's so cute and cheerful now. And all they did is paint it. It's so nice. It's fun. You walk in and you're like, this is like a party every day here,
Yeah,
right? So it doesn't need to cost a lot.
It doesn't.
It's just thinking about what's going to lift people's spirits and quiet the noise,
So
mentally and externally.
let's move from noise to nature. We know that nature, of course, plays a huge role in human psychology, whether that's from reducing cortisol, improving memory, even reducing aggression, right? But in cities like the UAE and in the wider GCC, of course, we live in a hot, arid climate. And we are actually one of the most water scarce regions or deserts in the world. And this usually makes the integration of nature into our cities a bit more difficult. So my question to you, Dr. Louise, is what does meaningful biophilic urbanism look like in hot environments, and what should we be doing more of here?
So planting things that belong here
Yeah.
would go a long
Native
way.
flora and fauna. Yeah.
Because we already know it works.
Yes,
it's
true.
growing in the desert. It
And
doesn't
it has
need
been
water.
Yeah.
So you look at all these tropical gardens, you're like,
Why?
what is this pineapple plant growing? Like, this doesn't belong here, right? Yes, it's beautiful to look at, but again, just thinking about our resources, so that'd be one. Thinking about also nature comes in many different forms. So it doesn't need to be a park and a manicured garden, but it can be a rooftop garden. So every building has a roof. So how do we make use of that? So again, yes, we have lots of sun, but thinking about what would grow up there and knowing that the more nature we put, the more, immediately the temperature starts to come down.
Yep.
If we do it right, it starts to collect and save water on its own, which requires less water over time. We can also think about things like beehives. This is nature,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, right.
So it doesn't always have to be like green, lush lawns,
Right.
but anything alive.
True.
Anything alive,
Right.
will be a good one. Other things, though, is, again, just making use of the spaces that are already there. So, again, these underpasses, but empty lots. Also, we do nothing with empty lots. And sometimes an empty lot is right in between two buildings. It's already shaded. Could we just stick a community garden in there?
Even if it's just temporary,
Yeah,
right?
Just one
Exactly.
season. It's good enough. We put a bunch of
Yeah.
planter boxes. The lot's been sold now. All right, we pick up our boxes and we go to the next one.
Yeah.
Like, it's not a big deal.
Yeah, true.
So that also begs into question, which I think we'll get there at some point, but the input of community and how do people,
So important.
course.
who carries the box? Somebody
Yes.
carries the box, right?
Yeah.
So I think when it comes to nature, I think there's a lot of things we can do, but I want to add one more thing that nature does.
Please.
When we think about human relationships and how we attach to one another, attachment is incredibly important. So babies attach to their mothers, and it's a psychological attachment.
Yeah.
We attach to partners, we attach to brothers and sisters, we attach to humans. It turns out we attach to nature. So this
okay.
is new research coming out in the last little while, and we're like, what? We attach to nature in the same way. So simply being around nature helps us feel psychologically better.
Yeah.
It settles us. It helps us feel rooted.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
not
yeah.
just like, chaos.
Yeah.
It's not normal for us to be living in
And
cement.
concrete jungles. No.
We were never designed for this.
True.
And so when people are around nature, whatever form it takes, the wilder the better, though. And I've noticed, everything everything is cut within an inch of its life. It's like, can we just let things grow? Somehow our deep psyche, we recognize nature.
Yeah.
And it helps us feel better. You also talked about aggression. Areas where there's more nature, actually there's less crime as well.
Wow.
Areas
Okay,
where there's
interesting.
more, so cities can use just the green effect for crime. So Charles talks about that in his book as well. But also neighborhoods where there's more tree cover by square kilometer have lower antidepressant prescription rates.
Wow.
So we can look at mental health by neighborhoods and start looking at, who's taking what medication for what. And we find that where there's more greenery, again, less depression, less anxiety,
Yeah.
less major mental health issues, lower BMI,
Yeah.
people are more active. Like
Wow.
nature is really a magic pill
Yeah.
almost for everything.
And it's crazy how the built environment really sets your whole,
undermines for the total opposite.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think this
Exactly.
topic of conversation became super important, or came to light actually during COVID.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
people were locked up indoors, the first thing that they wanted to do was just spend time outdoors and be in nature, be in parks.
Yeah.
And I think that relativity or connection started to grow since, people started to make that connection, that they wanted to rehabilitate in nature.
In nature, yeah.
And I think just increasingly we're just talking more about happiness
Yeah.
and well-being. Like people
Yeah.
are kind of, and COVID was great for this.
Yeah.
People were like, yo, how do I want to live my life?
Yeah.
If it's going to be short, I want to be happy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? So what are the quickest ways to make that happen? And so we are having more of these conversations. We are identifying more and more what leads to better quality of life.
And which leads me to my next question, because people don't know what could actually make them feel happy, right? They might prioritize space over access, or using their cars over walking,
Or cycling.
or cycling. So how can planners and city leaders help residents make better lifestyle choices that align with well-being without being prescriptive?
Yeah. So if we think about DEWA, they issue every month, your water use compared to your neighbor.
Yes, yeah.
So suddenly you're like, oh my gosh, I'm using a lot of water. Or, woohoo, I'm always under. I'm like, of course I am. Okay. But we can issue guidelines for better living. If we
Yeah.
issue guidelines around how much water to use,
And
the
it's
American...
such a soft nudge, but it's so effective.
Yeah. So what to look for when you're buying a house? What to look for when you're deciding what area of the city in? What if we measured happiness? What if we mapped happiness in cities?
Wow.
So that people can go, now we look at rear prices. How
Yeah.
much is this one? How much is this one? Couldn't we look at how happy this
Instead of a
neighborhood
rental
is?
price index, you have a happiness index for a neighborhood.
Yes.
Yeah.
How much honking? How much noise is there? How much irritation am I likely to feel on a daily basis? Because there's a racetrack going on in this neighborhood as well. These are important things to know, because everybody is drawn to the marina.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, everybody's there. That's the problem. Everybody's there, and you got to live there, right? So it always looks like a great idea until at 3 a.m. you're like, oh my gosh, I can't sleep. I actually have a job. Doesn't anybody sleep in this area, right? Or you're stuck in traffic every single day.
Oh my God.
And your apartment's just there, and
Yeah.
you can't even get to it. So sometimes we don't really know how to make these decisions. So I think this is a role that cities could really play. It's public education. How do you make these choices? Families are going to want this. Somebody who's 22 is going to want this.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's space for everybody, but it just help us to make better decisions.
Yeah.
So just a quick example, I had a friend who moved on the boulevard. Really, this was like her life's ambition to live on the boulevard. And I'm like, it's going to be a bad idea.
It's a
Yeah.
nightmare.
I already know this. It's going to be a bad idea.
Yeah, exactly.
Finally and the apartment's great. Like, it's amazing. And yeah, within a day, she's like, I didn't sleep.
Yeah.
Oh, really? What a surprise. Can't sleep. Can't open the balcony doors. Not only is it noisy, but the exhaust,
Yeah.
right? So the
Fumes,
smell.
yeah.
Smells, yeah.
So really, she didn't last very long and is looking for a new place.
Oh, wow.
So it's a great place to go.
yeah.
But going somewhere and living
Are
somewhere
two completely
very
different things. Absolutely.
And sorry,
please.
I just wanted to add one point, because it's really interesting looking at things from the perspective of a happiness index, because I feel like that would also give people that sense of ownership and wanting to care
And make
about
their neighborhood
communities.
happier.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, so there's going to be that sense of like also wanting them to contribute back to their
And it
neighborhood.
also builds out what is the notion of happiness.
Yeah.
So this happiness mapping, there was a great example in Australia.
Yeah.
I forget the name of the town, but I know they did it. And it was looking at things like in whatever square neighborhood, how many blocks, how many people smiled at you. So there's also a smile index. So it
Wow.
sounds a little bit cheesy.
Yeah.
But think about, you go to some neighborhoods and people do their best to ignore you, and you're like, oh, I don't think I'm wanted here.
Yeah.
You feel a bad vibe,
Yeah,
right?
For sure.
yeah.
But when people are like, hi,
And
are
that
you
could
lost?
that
Yeah.
could change your whole day.
Of course, you're like, I want to linger here, I want to
Yeah.
shop here, I want to eat here, sit in a cafe.
Yeah, and if you just feel totally unwanted, that's
Yeah.
not where you're going to go. So again, giving people that voice, I think, yes, helps people have a stake in what their neighborhood is like. Because also, if you see your neighborhood is rated really low and everybody's unhappy,
Yeah.
but also maybe that'll bring your real estate price down too. So it's in your interest to be like, good morning, hi, saying hi to all your neighbors.
This is the most depressive neighborhood. Don't move here. So speaking of mapping that, I think you've explored how happiness can be measured through both subjective and digital tools. And you talk about digital tools like Mappiness.
Yeah.
Okay. So in a planning context, how do we make emotional impact visible and accountable? So what I'm trying to ask, I guess, is how can governments or municipalities use happiness data to help inform better planning decisions?
So I think it's a little bit harder on the happiness side.
Yeah.
So people are inspired, it's playful. I mean, that still gives us good information, but definitely on the unhappiness side, then this gives us an idea. So if everybody is pissed off, I'll just say this,
Go for it.
you can edit, But if everybody's angry and frustrated, stressed, tired, like this starts to give us an indication something's not working here. What is not working? And then, of course, you're not just mapping the emotion, but where specifically. So we're asking people, like, literally geolocate where this is happening. And sometimes it's, every time I pull up to this corner, the tree, this is one time where the tree has been let to grow, and it's now a blind spot and it's not safe, and it really makes me angry because this stupid tree's there all the time. So, that will signal to somebody in the urban planning municipality, wherever, come cut this thing, right? So that giving that instant feedback, but in a concrete way, this is the issue, can really be helpful. And again, help people feel a sense of responsiveness. Like the municipality is listening. They came out. I saw them cut the tree. Keep using this, right?
Right.
And slowly, we start to improve the city.
And I love the flip. It's like, instead of it being typically urban planning is done from a top-down approach, here you're almost flipping it and having the people that actually are getting impacted by these decisions to help shape how their city's built. Yeah.
So, quick example, again, we going on a bike ride, and they're doing construction. So they built this like weird little ramp over it, and clearly built by somebody who does not ride a bike. Yeah. Because you're like, dude, do you know how dangerous this is?
Oh my God.
Almost everybody I know has fallen off this little ramp, right? So again, just a good example of, ask me. I will tell you this is unsafe.
Right. Yeah.
So
I use it. So
I use it.
Yeah.
I know. You don't ride a bike.
Yeah.
So asking people is so simple,
super
and it costs nothing, and people are very happy to tell you.
So, Dr. Louise, if leadership were to approach you or the planning authority and they asked you to implement 3 different interventions in the next 6 months that would, contribute to that would contribute to people's well-being and make our city feel happier, what would you tell them to do right now?
And I can see you've
I planned for this question.
Go for it.
I totally planned for this question. Although we've talked about many of them.
That's okay. You can bring them back.
I think it's ask me. Ask me.
Yeah.
So when I lived in Canada, I lived in a city called Red Deer, medium-sized city, and every year they would put forward different committees that had people from the municipality, city mayor's office, urban planning, engineering, but they left a few chairs for everyday people. Okay. And you could be like, hey, I want to do that. So you put forward your little CV and what your interest was, and they had elections where everyday people could be part of this committee. So it's kind of like a people's committee.
Okay.
But you get to have your say on things so there was a committee for crime, there was a committee for nature, there was a committee for parks, another one for events, and so forth. But so I applied and I never got asked. But anyway, every year I applied and I'm like, pick me, come on. But I wanted to be heard. I had ideas, but I also want to learn. I want to be part of this city's development. And I think sometimes city people, just in general, maybe don't realize how much people want to like their cities. They want to love their cities. They want to belong. And I think sometimes, city planners is kind of like, well, we've given you all the stuff and that's it. We've done our job, but I want to help you, right?
Yeah.
There's an emotional attachment to our cities, and really to have them think about, how do we increase these notions of place making also? How do we help people build this emotional attachment?
So
Because if I'm
important.
attached to the city, I will stay here.
Yes.
Not only will I stay here, I will promote it on every single Instagram post.
Exactly.
My Dubai. I'm posting it everywhere, right? But I'll be your biggest promoter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's about
So
co-creating.
ask me and make space for people to come in and take part of that process. The other one is, this notion of guidelines. And giving neighborhoods, not giving, but kind of thinking about neighborhood identities and who's in charge of that neighborhood.
Yeah.
So often it's, again, the municipality issues all the guidelines, but what if we had guidelines for neighborhood associations, guidelines for neighborhood sociability, guidelines for neighborhood events? So we kind of let people make these places their own.
Yeah.
But we
Yeah.
give guidelines.
Of course,
right?
of course.
And they can structure themselves with a little
Yeah.
committee and put forward the name so it's all official and nice. But people really want to belong.
Yeah.
They want to shape their
This reminds me of
spaces.
this initiatives called Frijna, I think, which is like a WhatsApp group that different neighborhoods do, and this becomes like a community
okay.
thing.
Farij
that,
means neighborhoods. In
Okay.
Arabic.
Farij
Yeah.
means
Okay.
neighborhood in Arabic. So there's like, at least that's a start for a platform where people, at least within a community,
Yeah.
start to talk about like events that are happening, things that are happening. I mean, yes, a lot of people use it for like, I'm moving out, so here's like, if
Yeah.
I'm doing a yard
Come
sale.
by my
Yeah.
couch.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think that's already a good start, whereas you have a digital platform that starts to connect people, because a lot of people live in neighborhoods and they're so disconnected, they don't know their neighbors.
Yeah. And that's something the municipality could really
Could really
take on.
push.
Yeah.
And yes,
right?
absolutely.
So if you have an issue in your neighborhood, here's your neighborhood representative.
Right.
Exactly.
Right? And then that person could sit on a bigger city committee and say, we're having an issue with the water, blah, 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 whatever it is.
Yeah.
So again, it takes some of the responsibility off of the municipality, because people can do it and are
Right.
happy to step in. And
Yes.
it's kind of a badge of honor, like,
Yeah.
I'm on this committee.
Yeah.
People really like that. But it's a way to bring people together.
For
Because
sure.
now you have to find out who that person is. They live 3 doors down,
Yep.
and you go find them. So it's also a way to build communities as well. I do have one more, and it's just this idea of nature. And this is where I really love what Dubai has done. This notion of by 2040, and I'm sure I'm not wording this properly, but 60% is going to be green. But thinking about, was it Singapore, where
Yeah.
it's a city in a park,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So why can't we do that?
Right.
Right? There's nothing saying that these lots have to be empty. Just last night, I walked to this new little grocery store. My neighborhood's just becoming so great. I walked to do groceries for the first time in 5 years.
Wow.
It was so
God.
exciting.
Yeah.
Because I used to do this at home. So I had
Yeah.
my little bag and I walk in to do groceries. But as I walked by this building and I saw the whole front of it, it's all paving bricks. Total waste of space. There's not one bench. There's not one tree.
Not
it's,
shaded.
It's dead space. Nothing is
Yeah.
ever going to happen there. Couldn't we just rip all that up and make a garden out of it?
Right.
So we have space.
Yeah. It's
So-
how we're
And
using
maybe
it.
a community garden as well, right? And bringing in urban farming, getting the residents in the area to
Fantastic.
come and grow their produce.
So again, we're meeting social needs,
Yeah.
psychological needs, health needs,
Yeah.
everything in one. So really it's to encourage nature, whatever form that takes.
Yeah, sure.
That's my order.
I love that. So along those lines, or maybe to try to, before we close, let's synthesize all of that and ask you, if you were, Dr. Louise, to imagine a truly happy city, not just functional or beautiful, but also emotionally supportive, what would that place look like to you? And in your view, how close are we to building it in the UAE and the broader region?
I know it's here as well.
It's a very loaded question.
Yeah,
I know.
gosh. Again, I think I'm maybe less aware of what's happening in Abu Dhabi, but I know there's a lot of work going on there.
Yeah.
Definitely Dubai, I am seeing it. It's not just in words or newspaper, press releases. I am seeing it around. So
Yeah.
I think definitely we are on the right track. And again, it's how do we bring people nature, psychological well-being, mental well-being. So again, more the, self-efficacy, confidence, thinking optimistically, being hopeful, but also this notion of social capital, where it's not just, we say hi, but it's more than that. It's we do things together.
Yeah.
So we have, a basketball club below my building, for example.
Yeah.
So it's really just kind of bringing in everything that we know that humans need to reach their best selves. To me, that would be just the ideal city.
I love that.
That's beautiful. Dr. Louise, thank you for bringing such a powerful lens to a powerful human lens to urban planning. This conversation has really helped us really reframe what it means to build cities, not just for living, but for thriving ultimately, right? Your work really reminds us that every street, every bench, every building has the power to uplift or diminish someone's experience, right? And that city making is as much about psychology as it is about policy. To our listeners, thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe and follow us at ARKAT.ae. We've got more transformative conversations coming your way. Until next time, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Louise,
Thank
so
you
much.
so
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.